Chapter 13 covers integrated pest management. So for chapter 13, we are going to look at the following items. We're going to talk about how we can deny pests access to our operation, how we can deny pests food and shelter, looking for signs of infestation and activity, how to correctly store pesticides, and how to select a pest control operator, or PCO. So when we're talking about eliminating and securing and making sure we're getting rid of pests, we look at what's called integrated pest management programs. An IPM is to prevent pests from entering the operation. So that's our first thing, is how do we use preventative measures to prevent pests from even getting into the operation? If we end up with pest issues, how do we use control measures to eliminate pests that get inside? And when we're looking at all of this, we usually work as close as we can with those pest control operators in order to do the job right. So integrated pest management, we first look at preventative measures for keeping pests out, and then we look at control measures to eliminate pests that may be getting inside of our operation. So the basic rules is, first, we want to not give them easy access to our operation. So deny pest access. And then we want to make sure we deny food, water, and shelter. Okay. So the first thing is typically the exterior. How do we deny them access to get actually into our building? And then if they happen to get into the building, how do we do ways to deny them food, water, and shelter, what they need in order to survive? Okay, so those are the two basic rules on our end. And then the third rule is to work with that pest control operator that's licensed to make sure that we are helping to prevent and eliminate any pest issues that might arise. First and foremost, how do we deny pest access? So first thing we look at is when products coming in. So when we want to look at how do we deny pest access from deliveries, obviously make sure you work with reputable approved suppliers. You've heard that many times for different reasons, but this is another one as well. Those approved reputable suppliers have their own integrated pest management programs in order to reduce or eliminate pests that might be in their facilities. So approved reputable suppliers, we decrease the odds that pests are going to enter our facility through our deliveries that we're getting from those suppliers. Of course, we also want to make sure we're checking our deliveries before they enter your operation. Again, that's not just for temperature, quantity, quality, those things, but it's also making sure that there are no signs that they have a pest issue. And of course, if you do see signs of pests or a pest issue, then you would want to refuse shipments. So you can see in the picture there, if you get a bag of flour in and that corner, like you see, is all chewed up, that is an indicator that there's a pest issue that are trying to access that flour. So you'd want to refuse that shipment because you don't know what's in there, what's with it, anything along those lines. So it's not just looking at temperature, quality, quantity, et cetera, just looking for signs if there are any potential pest issues that go along with that. How do we prevent them from coming through doors, windows, and vents? We want to make sure all windows and vents have screens on them to not allow access, especially with vents and stuff. If it's an open vent, you want to make sure there's a screen over the vent to allow potential access of pests through the vents. Self-closing doors and door sweeps are something you want to have on all doors. Again, we're leaving that outdoor open. It's just an invitation saying, hey guys, come on in, enjoy the party type of thing. So the self-closing doors is one thing. Door sweeps on the doors, again, that's just that added protection. So, there is that slight sometimes gap between the door and the sill. Those door sweeps help to cover that slight gap. Not only is it going to help from a HVAC perspective, it's not going to let cold air, hot air in. That's also going to prevent pests from walking in through your door, underneath your door in this case. Make sure that you're repairing any gaps and cracks in door frames and in thresholds, and use weather stripping on bottoms of doors that don't have thresholds. Again, trying to prevent anything from wanting to try to get in. When it comes to that, install air curtains above or alongside doors. Those are ways to, air curtains help prevent flying pests from working their way in, flies, gnats, things along those lines, because that air curtain produces a strong enough current to prevent a flying insect from working its way into your facility. So that's an added addition that you could do as far as protection when it comes to pest management. And of course, we want to make sure we're keeping all exterior openings tightly closed. We don't want to give them a reason to come in because we're just opening the door, so to speak. You can see in the picture there how underneath the threshold area, there's the gap because of the concrete that's going away. Well, underneath there potentially is a way for those pests to get in. We want to make sure we get that taken care of as soon as possible, making sure we're filling those in so we do not give any of those pests a way to walk in our door, so to speak. Pipe issues. We need to make sure that we're using concrete or fill holes or sheet metal to cover openings around pipes. You can see there they used like a concrete around the pipe, so there's no gap in between where the pipe and the wall actually is. Like I said earlier, installing screens over ventilation pipes and ducts on the roof, again, just to prevent pests from coming in. Making sure you're covering floor drains with hinged grates to keep rodents out. So that hinged grate, if for some reason a rodent is able to get into the, let's say, sewer lines, so to speak, they could go through the lines, but once they get to the floor drain, they're not going to be able to get out into the kitchen because there's a grate over top of that. So the grate's going to allow the water to flow through into the sewer line, but it's not going to allow a rodent to come out and hang out and make home in your place. So things like that, again, things that we don't necessarily think about, or it's just back of mind, are things that, again, important enough just to prevent pests from working their way in. When it comes to floors and walls inside, we want to make sure we're sealing all cracks in any floors and walls. Of course, we want to use permanent sealant that's recommended by our PCO or the health department. Seal spaces or cracks where stationary equipment is fitted to the floor. Make sure that if you are sealing equipment to the floor, that they have there's no cracks or anything like that, or any spaces where pests could get up underneath the equipment and create a home for themselves. So anytime you actually have a piece of equipment, like we talked about in the previous chapter, that is on the tabletop that doesn't have that 4 inches of clearance, it has to be sealed to that tabletop to make sure, or sealed to the floor is another possibility, because we don't want to have a space for pests to get in and create a home. And just like before, use approved sealers, or you could use concrete depending on the size of the space. So you can see in the picture, the maintenance person or what have you is sealing in any cracks in the walls, because again, those cracks could be ways for pests to get in. And remember, those cracks don't have to be very big for pests to get in. So it's important that we get all those sealed up. So first thing we try to do is build them out. Okay, so we've made sure our doors are tight fitting. We make sure that everything has covers on them. We seal any cracks. We make sure that there are no places that the pests can get in. Okay, so we're going to build them out as the first line of defense. If they still happen to get in, then the next thing is to pretty much starve them out. Deny them food and shelter. Right. So first and foremost, and one of the big causes where you can see a pest buildup is your garbage. And we want to deny food and shelter in the garbage itself, which means we need to make sure we're throwing garbage out quickly and correctly. We don't want to let the garbage sit in the containers for 2 or 3 days. You take them out on a regular basis, daily at the minimum when it comes to that. Making sure that we're maintaining those areas where we're storing garbage. So making sure our containers are clean and good condition, making sure those outdoor containers are tightly covered so pests can't get in and get a food source where they're dining al fresco outside as opposed to in your facility. And then make sure we clean up spills around containers immediately. Again, we don't want to give food or water or liquid source to a pest to be able to say, hey, this is where I'm going to come and hang out and get a bite to eat or something to drink. Make that environment inhospitable for pests. Don't give them a reason to want to come and hang out at your place because you are giving them food, water, or shelter because of your practices when it comes to cleanup and things like that. When it comes to recyclables, make sure we're restoring our recyclables correctly. Keeping them in a clean pest-proof container as well is always recommended. Again, don't give them a place to hang out, shelter. Don't give them food or water because the recyclables still have food bits and stuff in them. And of course, we want to make sure we're keeping our containers away from the building as regulations allow. We don't want to have them close enough where, again, they think, oh, this is the Trent dining al fresco. Hey, let's see what's going on inside as well. Storage practices. So next thing we look at is making sure we are getting our food and our products put away correctly and in a manner that is not going to give them food or shelter. So we want to make sure we're storing food and supplies quickly and correctly. We don't want to leave them sitting on the floor for half a day or whatever the case may be, because then that potentially gives a food and or shelter source for those pests. We want to keep them away from walls. So you want to have a little bit of a gap between the food product and the walls itself, and at least 6 inches off the floor. That number sound familiar? You've heard it before. Anytime you're storing things, we want to store 6 inches off the floor. Again, it's for easy cleanup, easy accessibility, so we can make sure that there is product that's getting cleaned up so it does not get stuck underneath for pests. Make sure that we are rotating product. Remember FIFO we talked about, not only because of quality concerns, but also it makes the product be moving around so the pests are not settling down and breeding where the product is at. Good cleaning practices is the next thing that we look at. So of course, if we make a mess, clean it up immediately. Food and beverage, we make a mess, get it cleaned up. We don't want to leave it there as a buffet for pests. Make sure we're cleaning toilets and restrooms as often as needed. Again, don't create an environment for the pests to want to hang out in. Make sure that we're training our staff to keep lockers and break areas clean. It's one thing, we're keeping our kitchen clean, keeping the prep area clean, dishwashing area clean, blah, 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 blah. But then if you have a locker area and break area, sometimes that's all the rules just go right out the window. We don't think about that. So it's a matter of training the staff to, hey, don't leave food in your lockers. Make sure that your lockers are being cleaned out on a regular basis. Again, don't just leave a bunch of trash in the bottom of your locker, things like that. Same thing goes with the break areas, making sure they are picked up and they're cleaned on a regular basis. Again, because you don't want that to be the home base for those pests to hang out. Because, hey, we're not giving them anything in the kitchen, but, oh, guess what? We're giving them food, water, and shelter in our lockers or in our break area that we might have. So think about that as well. Make sure we keep our tools and supplies clean and dry. We don't want to leave them wet. Again, that could be potential moisture, water source for a pest. Making sure we're storing wet mops on hooks rather than on the floor. It's always a good idea to have them hanging down so they allow to air dry. And again, we're not giving a water source to our pests. Making sure we're emptying water from the buckets to keep from attracting rodents. Use those service sinks to empty out those buckets, leave them upside down to dry so we don't have standing water. Standing water is a water fountain for pests, for rodents especially. So make sure we're not giving them their supply of water because we're not doing cleaning and stuff correctly. When it comes to the grounds and dining areas, again, making sure we're maintaining the actual outside grounds, mowing the grass, pulling weeds, get rid of standing water. Again, we don't want area for pests to have a drink, pick up litter, basic stuff. Not only is it visually good for your establishment, but it's also going to help with minimizing pest issues. If you have outdoor garbage containers, have them covered. And again, it doesn't have to be one of those like lid things, but if you notice, a lot of outdoor containers have those domes on top that have like the hinge door. Again, by something like that, it takes pressure to get into that. So it's tougher for a pest to get into those items when they have covers over those garbage containers. Make sure you're removing any uneaten food, dirty dishes from any tables of people that are eating outside. Again, don't leave them with al fresco dining. Just like inside, clean up spills as quickly as possible. Do not feed birds or wildlife. Again, sometimes it's cool. Oh, it's so cute. The birds are here, blah, blah, blah. But when we're putting food out, not only does that attract those birds and wildlife, which could be, issue, but it can also attract the pests too, because if you're feeding birds or wildlife, it might not just be birds or wildlife that's eating that food that you have out there. So don't give them a reason to want to come because you're actually feeding them. Look at electronic insect eliminators or zappers, keeping them though away from food, customers, staff, and service areas. Those bug zappers can be great, but it's definitely not good for the ambiance if somebody's eating outside and they hear a going, especially at dusk, because of the bug zappers are going away. So you always want to make sure that they're strategically placed away from where food is being served, where your customers and stuff like that are at. And also by doing that, it draws those pests away from everybody and to where they need to go, to those bug zappers or whatever type of insect eliminator that you have to go and die. And if you end up having hives, you have bird nests, things like that, get a hold of your PCO to get that taken care of. Have that done professionally. Don't try to do it on your own. You could end up creating more of a mess than actually being helpful, especially when it comes to hives, beehives, wasp nests, things like that. So have that done professionally to make sure that that is getting taken care of and nobody's getting hurt as well. So pests that we typically deal with when it comes to being in the industry. One of the big ones that we notice, of course, are flies. Flies feed on garbage and waste. And the biggest thing with flies, of course, is they can spread pathogens, especially like Shigella is a big one. And what it is the flies, when they land on garbage, they land on waste, it's their feet that are in that garbage and waste, and they come over and they land on a piece of food. Well, they've cross-contaminated now, and whatever pathogen might have been on their feet when they were on that garbage or that waste, then they brought it over and transferred it over to the food itself. So flies, a big one because they can spread pathogens because of their landing on our food and such. Cockroaches, of course, can carry pathogens as well. They live and they breed in places that are dark, warm, moist, and hard to clean. Okay, so they don't like the light, they like the dark areas, they prefer warm, moist environments and areas obviously that are hard to clean, because then you're not sweeping them out type of thing, which is again why you want to make sure that you are creating an environment where there are no hard to clean areas. Everything should be easily accessible, easily cleanable, and that's going to help prevent those. Unfortunately, if you see cockroaches in the daylight, you probably already have an infestation. So now, if not a matter of building them out, it's a matter of getting hold of your PCO to have them eliminated, because there's probably already an issue if you see them during the daylight hours. So some different signs of cockroach infestation: a strong, oily kind of odor, almost like a old oil kind of thing. If you've ever had oil that's gone bad on you, that kind of can remind you. Droppings or their feces, they look like little grains of black pepper. So if you see black pepper trails along your countertop or things like that, it's not that, one of your staff is sprinkling pepper over your tables. That's probably a sign of cockroach infestation. Any capsule shaped egg cases, they can be brown, dark red, or black in color. They're very leathery, smooth, or shiny. So those are some different signs of infestation if you're not looking at the actual live cockroach itself. Rodents, another issue. Rodents will urinate and defecate as they move around. So they use the restroom while they're moving. They typically hide during the day. They stay close to their nests, and they can squeeze through very small holes. They can jump and they can climb. So something to be thinking about with that. Having keen senses of hearing, touch, and smell. And they can be adept at knowing how to avoid bait and some traps. They're pretty smart overall compared to other pests. So again, you've got these rodents, they're using the restroom all over the place. Obviously, that's not a good thing if that stuff's coming in contact with your food contact surfaces, utensils, things like that. That's really gross. But we need to take care of those, make sure that we are getting rid of them. Some signs of rodent infestation: gnaw marks. So it looks like clawing or biting. The droppings, if they are shiny and black, they're fresh. If they are gray, they're old looking. Urine stains, dirt tracks along the walls, and then nests are another indicator. And nests, typically they can be cloth, hair, feathers, grass, scraps, paper, combinations of things. It's to keep them warm and keep their babies warm and stuff while they're at their nest. Typically, they're usually in quiet places, usually found in holes or something along those lines. 9 times out of 10, they're found in near food and water. So again, they got everything close. Shelter, food, and water is all pretty darn close. And sometimes they may be outside next to buildings. So it could be that they're not necessarily living in the building, but if they're coming in to get food and water and then coming out to a safe spot outside where they have their nest built up for them to hang out, especially when the weather is not extremely cold or anything along those lines. So how do we work with our pest control operator? Of course, when we're working with a PCO, we want to make sure we're developing an approach to pest management, staying current with new equipment and products, making sure they're providing prompt service to address problems as they occur, and then record keeping of all steps taken to prevent and control pests. It's important that if you're running a kitchen, you're running a restaurant, you need to work with a pest control operator. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Don't try to do it yourself. Don't hire your cousin Jim, who does it on the side, but is actually does something else. Make sure that person is professional and licensed to do pest control operations. Again, the last thing you want is for an infestation to occur by doing the different things of building them out, denying them food, shelter, and water. Those things are going to make a huge difference. Before you decide on who you're going to choose, check the references. Ask for references of who they work for now, and check those references. Make sure they're licensed by the state, and then make sure you have a written contract outlining what's to be performed. And that's going to typically include the description of the service, how long this contract is good for, what your duties are, and what records are going to be kept by that pest control operator. So, I mean, those are really, really, really important. You always want to make sure you have your contracts are in writing, because that then gives you a basis to cover your butt, just in case something, they're not doing something, they're not held up their end of the bargain. You have a written contract to say, well, no, this is what we agreed upon for what I am paying for. Because yes, you are spending money to have an independent contractor come in and take care of, that part of what you need done in your kitchen. You expect it to be done right and on the terms that are agreed upon. So you need to make sure that they are holding up their end of the bargain. And then it only works though if you have that stuff in writing to make sure that both parties understand what their responsibilities are when it comes to how we're going to take care of this pest control. Typically, pest control operator is going to inspect the facility at the beginning. They're going to you want to give them complete access to the building. Make sure that the staff knows that a PCO is coming in, and if they have questions, to make sure you're answering them honestly. Make sure it's an honest assessment. You want to make sure that if there are issues, they are addressed. I know it could be slightly embarrassing. Oh, we've got a rodent issue, or we have a fly issue, or something like that. It's not something that we're proud of, but that pest control operator is there to help you take care of that and to eliminate any issues that are there, and then work to prevent future issues from happening. So you've got to be upfront and honest, make sure you're answering their questions honestly, so you can get the best bang for your buck. And then also so you can make sure that things are going as smooth as possible, that you can get those things taken care of and prevent future issues from happening. If you are able to provide building plans and equipment layout for the pest control operators, that's going to help them plan out how they're going to do their job. And then, point out any trouble spots is a good thing as well. Letting them know what you have seen, where their potential issues may be coming about, is a good thing as well. Treatment plans include areas treatments that they're going to use for each area, or problem and potential risk from that. They're going to have date and times of treatment. Staff should not be on site during the treatment time, so it's usually typically in downtime going down for that. Steps you can take to control pests, building defects that hinder prevention and control, and timing of follow-up visits are all things that are part of that plan that you should be looking at to make sure that we are preventing and controlling any pest issues that might arise. Any control measures that are going to be used, they should be environmentally sound. They should be safe for our operations, and they should be effective for pests in our area. Not all pests are the same. So we need to make sure that what's being treated for pests here in Illinois, it works for pests in Illinois, not for pests in California that might need different treatments and stuff. Of course, it needs to be safe for the operations. It's not that we're just going to go in and fumigate the entire building. That's going to be a little tough, especially with all the food and equipment and utensils and smallwares and things along those lines. So they need to work on things that are going to be safe for the operation to make sure that the pests are being controlled and that you're still able to do things in a safe manner for your customers and your employees. So using and storing pesticides. So here are some reasons why you should not do pesticides on your own. First and foremost, pesticides may not work, or worse, could be harmful if you don't use them right. Pests can develop resistance and immunity to pesticides. Control measures can vary by county and by states. And some pesticides are not approved for use in restaurants or food service operations. Again, you've got to know all the rules and regs, making sure you have all your I's dotted and T's crossed, so we can make sure we're doing this in a safe manner. Again, it goes back to partnering with that PCO to make sure that things are being done right and things are being done safe and effectively, so you're getting the most bang for your buck. When pesticides will be applied, things that you need to do, First and foremost, you want to wait until you're closed for business and staff is not on site when it's being done. Make sure you remove any food and movable food contact surfaces should be removed so they don't come in contact with the chemicals or what have you being used for pest control management. Anything that cannot be moved, you want to cover that equipment or food contact surfaces. Any at the time that an area has been sprayed, you always want to wash, rinse, and sanitize those areas after the treatment's been done. Again, just to make sure that if anything accidentally came in contact with that food contact surface, that we are getting it removed. And then we want to make sure that if we have any pesticides that we are storing, used or stored on the premise, that we have a safety data sheet for those pesticides. So in case there's an issue, we can go to reference it as far as how to treat any issues that might come about from those. If you are using and storing pesticides, if they're going to be stored on premise, we want to keep them in their original containers. And we want to make sure we keep them in a secure location away from all foods, utensils, and equipment. That's even more important with pesticides, even with them more than chemicals. Our cleaning chemicals and stuff are meant to be used in conjunction with our food contact surfaces and our stuff like that, where this stuff is not meant to be in contact with any of those things. So we want to make sure we're keeping them in a secure, separate environment. If we need to dispose of pesticides, of course, we always want to check our local regulations on what we do with any pesticides that are left over, and then make sure we're following our manufacturer's directions and whatever regulatory requirements are to dispose of empty containers to make sure we are doing it correctly and within the boundaries of the law. Pest management, again, it's kind of gross to think about. We don't want to think about flies, cockroaches, rodents, that type of thing in our facilities. But it is something we need to take in consideration because it can happen. And if we don't follow procedures, if we don't build them out, don't deny them access to food, water, shelter, have that integrated pest management, working with those PCOs, it's potentially going to happen. And so even though we don't want to think about it, it's not a cool thing to think about. It's kind of gross, like I said. We still need to have that as part of in the back of our mind, if not top of mind, especially when it comes to looking at how we can prevent it from happening. And if we do end up with an infestation, nip it in the bud, take care of it, get it under control, and then look at those preventative measures to make sure that does not happen again.